day. We've been doing this a while now, and I'm aware, because of the market trends, you know, there's a lot of new instructors kind of arriving onto the market now, or people sort of diversifying. I see this a lot with the emerging trends of, you know, and I think MMA sort of really started to spawn where you needed to be good at more than one thing to be sort of valid or trying to teach nowadays. So people are sort of branching out from necessarily the traditional routes or backgrounds into different subjects and maybe struggling at various levels with that. What, if any, kind of top tips or advice do you think we can kind of share with newer aspiring instructors to kind of, what would you like somebody to tell you 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago as you started your kind of instructional journey?
You made me start last time.
Okay, first of all, any type of self-defense or survival skills, self-preservation skills, people's lives are in your hand. That is the first thing I want any prospective instructor to know. You are not simply teaching somebody, okay, this is how you load and fire a gun. You are actually giving them the skills that will save their lives some dark night when there's nobody else around. And they will be 100% responsible for what they do. And what they do is going to be based on what you told them. I want, you know, if you think about that as an instructor, that's a tremendously heavy burden. It doesn't mean that you're responsible for their choices, but it absolutely means that you are 100% responsible for what you tell them. If you give them bad advice, if you leave big blanks in your instruction without telling them that there are blanks there that they need to fill in, if you give them advice that comes from bad sources, all of those things, those are on your head. On the other hand, when you tell them the things that are right and that are good and that are true, when you put it in context and help them find the holes in their own training that they can fill in, you can help save lives. That's the ultimate. That's the bottom line. Once you, as an instructor, once you have that, everything else is gravy. Everything else, all the little tips and tricks and techniques and tools, all of those follow naturally once you have the goal in mind.
Good. And to follow up on that, it's not about you. It's about the student.
Yes.
If you want to teach because you want to be called a teacher, or if you want to be called a master, you're doing it for the wrong reason. You need to get out there before you get people hurt. If you're doing it for anything about you, if it's about you, you're doing it wrong. And you can do it because you love it. You can do it because it makes you feel happy. You can do all that. But when you're sitting there, you're looking at that student, and it's about what the student needs, not what you want to give, not what you have, what you want to show off. Each student needs different stuff. And it's my line between martial arts and self-defense. In martial arts, I'm teaching subject matter. Self-defense, I'm teaching students. And self-defense is about the student, always and forever. If it's more important for you to keep your technique pure than to make it so that two different people can use it, because the two different people will not be able to use it the same way, then you aren't doing it for the right reasons. If you, for whatever reason, need to make sure that your students know that you're better than they are, the only reason to get into this is to make people who can take you out. If you cannot make someone dangerous to you, or your ego is too strong to let them be better than you, you are creating victims. You are not creating survivors. And that's stuff that you've got to watch all the time. Your job is to take someone and make them better than you. And if it's about anything other than that, you need to, respectfully as possible, you need to go shoot yourself in the fucking head and leave your students alone.
Twofold thought for me as well. And it's kind of a consolidation of what you guys have just highlighted there. As an instructor, you're still a student. You always have to be learning. And I have this heavy caveat for myself. The day I turn around and say, there's nothing else I can learn, is the day I quit teaching.
Yes.
The onus on me is to continuously improve, refine, research, develop. And that ties into the second point. And if I look at when I started teaching, if I had a time machine and could kind of go back and tell myself something, don't be afraid to develop and improve your training programs. Because for actually a long time, I taught the accepted template, knowing it could be better, but being terrified to change it on the basis I would be saying the person I got the template from, my instructors, weren't that good because I found a way to modify it. Whereas actually the modifications weren't necessarily about the technique. There was no flaw, there was limitations, but it was about so I could be more comfortable delivering it, because how one person teaches is very different how another person teaches. And I stifled and frustrated myself for a very long time just following the script. And the moment I allowed myself to say, hey, you know what, you can add things, you can change things, you can take it away, and you can definitely adapt it in real time to your students' needs, instead of like, we've got to tick these boxes. It's like, you've got that, so we don't need an hour of practice, we can move on to that. Or like, hey, you know what, we're not going to move on because you haven't got the skill yet, and it's the most critical thing that you need right now. So that kind of being dynamic in an instructional session, for me, is something I didn't do for a long time. I do constantly now, to the stage I almost run courses in courses, depending on student need. And that was just massively liberating and necessary. And the difference in the standard my students put out now is chalk and cheese. And this isn't a disservice to the students I had before, but as a younger instructor, I was putting out people that could replicate my demonstration, whereas I now put out people that own the skills I've shown them and understand what they need to do to make it work.
Okay, and part of that advice for new instructors, it doesn't matter your technical competence. The ability to teach is a separate skill.
Yes.
And
Oh my gosh, yes.
And you have to study teaching, be as dedicated to teaching as you were to acquiring the skill in the first place that you are teaching. Changing what your instructors did, especially syndemic and martial arts, things have been taught the same way for a very, very long, well, not actually that long a time. They didn't actually teach that way in the old days, but they've been taught that way, and people think that's the only way to teach. And we know so much more about teaching and learning, especially teaching adults.
Human knowledge is always expanding.
And you can become far more effective as a teacher than your teachers were. And it's not hard, especially if they weren't studying the teaching aspect of it.
I want to point out that the flexibility that you talk about, being able to teach the group of people in front of you, being able to look at the individual student and say, this is what this student needs right now, that is something that only comes to somebody who has that lifelong commitment to learning. It's not something that if you have always taught within a very rigid paradigm, you can manage that for years and years and years, but you'll never be able to move outside that until the day you say, okay, I'm going to learn as much about this field as I possibly can. And you might not be learning about that field in order to be able to flex, but you won't be able to flex until you've gotten knowledge that goes much deeper and much wider than the outline.
Yeah, agreed.
Cool. Wrap up.
We're going to have to. But what I just want to say is for the people watching this, obviously thanks for taking the time. And, we've gone through sort of 4 or 5 questions, and hopefully the knowledge and experience is useful. But just review those and think on them yourselves as well. That's the important part about this whole process. We're not just doing the campfire chats just to kind of espouse our opinion, but again, it's just to bring things to the surface that we think are important for people to be thinking about. So, all our contact details are clearly visible, so if you want to pick up on individual points, then you can. But that's it. Thanks for the time, guys.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.